The Tao teaches us about how to think differently. First of all, it teaches us how to think in a way that is in harmony with nature, with God, with Spirit, that you can find great wisdom in just how important something like water is, or how important it is to observe the way that creation takes place. You can learn a lot, he said, from just a simple spider, and noticing that a spider builds a web from a pattern that comes from within itself. And in the process of doing so, it allows whatever it is that comes to it to land there, and it isn't concerned with what doesn't come its way. The Tao says that we don't need to be in competition. We don't need to be anxious. We don't need to be fearful. We don't need to live lives of hatred, of revenge. He lived at a time of the warring states and was trying to teach people how to find peace when all around you are consumed with killing each other and hurting each other and hating each other. And so he asked us to look deep within ourselves and to find our own nature. And that's the second thing he said, is that everything has a nature, including you, and that you should abandon the idea that you are disconnected from that nature, from that divine place from which you came. So what it does, what the Tao has done, what I have tried to do in Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, is to teach people that no matter how you look at it, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at begin to change. And that was going to be the original title for this book. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It was just a little too long. So I came down to change your thoughts, change your life. Instead of thinking rigid thoughts, instead of thinking hard thoughts, think soft thoughts. And look for something like water and how water behaves. Why is the ocean, he said, the most powerful force in the universe? It's the most powerful force because it stays low, because it is humble and allows everything to come to it. The Tao says the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And that single step, what he's teaching us is to think small, to think about what you can do in this moment, rather than thinking big and then getting yourself consumed with never accomplishing anything. It teaches us to be content. It teaches us to be soft. It teaches us to be flexible. It teaches us to have an appreciation and an awareness that the Tao is in every single one of us, and every human being that you encounter, and every being that you encounter, and every plant and every animal and every tree that you encounter has the unfolding of God built into it. Find that truth. Find that truth within yourself. Look to your own nature. Discover that, and you'll have the greatest sense of peace you'll ever have. And I spent one entire year working on this book, living it, practicing it, and I've never been more peaceful, more joyful, and more a sense of aliveness of why I'm here and what I'm doing here. I don't question any of it. I just live in harmony with what Lao Tzu called the Great Tao. And the opening line of the Tao says, "The Tao that can be named is not the Tao." You can't put a name on it. All you can do is feel it in your heart.
I have now finished 67 verses of the Tao. And I've written 67 essays on when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And this isn't just a clever play on words here. This is a quantum truth. As my friend Deepak Chopra has often said to me, quantum physics is not only stranger than you think it is, it's stranger than you can think. So that if you look at your origination, the place that you came from, this thing that Lao Tzu called the Tao, this great source that is everywhere, there is no place that it is not. And yet it is doing nothing. And yet it leaves nothing undone. If you go out and just go for a walk this afternoon when you get home, just look at the perfection of all that is. Just look at the clouds and look at the sky and look at the ocean and look at the trees and look at the leaves, and even more important, look at the space between the leaves and look at the invisibleness and the perfection of how everything is. There's a constancy, if you will, and this constancy is always there. Here's what Lao Tzu said in verse 29. Do you think you can take over the universe and improve it? I do not believe it can be done. Everything under heaven is a sacred vessel and cannot be controlled. Trying to control leads to ruin. Trying to grasp, we lose. Allow your life to unfold naturally. Know that it too is a vessel of perfection. Just as you breathe in, breathe out. There is a time for being ahead, a time for being behind, a time for being in motion, a time for being at rest, a time for being vigorous, a time for being exhausted, a time for being safe, a time for being in danger. To the sage, all of life is a movement toward perfection. So what need has he for the excessive, the extravagant, or the extreme? There's a time for everything. Imagine if you knew this. If you really knew that what you were experiencing emotionally in your life was a part of what there is a time for, and that you're not really doing anything. Lao Tzu says it over and over again. You're not doing anything. You're being done. You're being done right now. You're one of the 10,000 things. And it is all being done, all of it. Like I do yoga every morning, or almost every morning, 5-6 days a week. I do this 90-minute Bikram yoga, this hot yoga. And this has helped me so much with just that simple little thing, just remembering what it says in verse 29 of the Tao. That there are times when you're in the midst of yoga, when you have a position where you have to put this foot out, and you have to turn this one down, and you have to get down here like this, and you have to take this arm, and I'm going to do it. And you have to do that for 60 seconds in a 110-degree room. That's after doing many other postures as well. There was a time when I would do that and I'd be so exhausted, and all I could think about was, when is this 60 seconds going to be up? Oh my God, when are we going to get through with this posture? When are we going to get on to where I can lie down on the floor? And finally, and I began to realize as this doing the Tao thing has really changed me dramatically, so that now when I'm in that position with one arm down and one arm up, and it is exhausting, and you're stretching, and you've got your arm right next to your ear, and you're holding on, that you say to yourself, there's a time for being exhausted, and there's a time for rest. There's a time for things not to work out. Imagine if you knew that in the midst of my working with my daughter, for example, when I see the struggle that she's going to, and I can stand back and say, there's a time for her to experience this. And there's a time for her not to experience it. I don't think there's any more all-pervasive theme in the Tao Te Ching than the idea of being a non-interferer. Do you, Stephen? I mean, isn't it? It's about not interfering, isn't it? It's about letting go. It's about allowing. It's about detaching. It's about disconnecting yourself from this belief that you are in charge of other people. I'm the father of 8 children. And the father of motivation. That's what they tell me, so I've got... And as this father of 8 children, one of the things that I've recognized, and what has made me, I think, a better parent, particularly even since I've been doing this, is my willingness to, I call it the bite your tongue verse of the Tao. Just hang back just for a second, just as you're about to interfere, just as you're about to lay it on and tell somebody else how they should be and what they should do and how they should do it, you step back and realize that what Khalil Gibran, the great Lebanese poet, in writing in The Prophet, said was just a basic truth. Your children are not your children. They are the products of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not for you. And you step back, and I can't even begin to tell you how freeing it is to realize that you don't have anything to do. You don't have anyone to control. You can be at peace.
So what we have to do is learn how to take this ego of ours, this part of us that believes that who we are is what we have and what we do and what other people think of us. But remember, if you grow up believing that you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what you have, when it's gone, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what other people think of you, your reputation, which we raise people to believe, I have to be concerned with what other people think of me. Take this ego and retrain it. And one of the ways that you do to retrain it is, first, you take this idea that the ego has of fear. What are you afraid of? Anybody out there, what are you afraid of? Shift from fear to curiosity. Become curious about what you're afraid of. That's what Lao Tzu taught me. Become curious about what you're afraid of. You're afraid of flying? Get curious about that. Get interested in that. You're afraid of snakes, you're afraid of disapproval, you're afraid. Just shift from fear and say, I'm going to become more curious about what I'm afraid of. And then take all of the things that you're attached to, like all of your photographs, like all of your furniture, like all of your clothing, like all of the stuff that you find so much attachment to, and start letting it go. Start letting it go. You know, the day that I turned that key on May the 11th in 2006, I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew there was a shift taking place. I felt freer than I'd ever felt, I think, in my life. In my mid-60s, out there on a whole new adventure. And here we are talking about it on national television, on PBS. Take that idea that you have to be attached to things and know that you came in with nothing, with no thing. And you're going to leave with nothing, with no thing. And understand that your life is a parenthesis in eternity. Live there without attachments. And then take your need to be in control of yourself, of others, of the situation, and shift from control to trust. Begin to have a trust. Lao Tzu is profound about this. In each one of the 81 verses, it comes up about 60 times as you look at letting go and letting God, allowing yourself to trust in your nature, allowing yourself to no longer believe that everything has to be controlled by me, and that other people no longer have to be in control of me as well. Begin to trust. Just like you did for the first 9 months. You trusted. Your nose showed up. Your height showed up. Your eyes showed up. Whatever. It all showed up. It's all perfect. It's all divine. So why not wander through your life and have this wonderful, peaceful knowing that it's all fine? And finally, shift from your sense of entitlement. Nobody can treat me that way. I'm entitled to have this. Well, I paid for that. I let go. I mean, that in 1 year, I let go of all of my entitlements. I don't feel I'm entitled to anything. I'm just here. Shift from entitlements to radical humility. Lao Tzu speaks about it so often. Stay humble. Stay low. The greatest leaders are the ones who do the least. The ones who stay back and just model and allow. And at the end of the day, in one of the verses of the Tao, it says, the people will say, we did it ourselves. We did it ourselves. In verse 49 of the Tao Te Ching, here's an exact quote. The sage is kind to the kind and kind to the unkind, because the nature of his being is kindness. And also, be wise and help all beings impartially, abandoning none. You know what I do? Just before I did this program, I have to admit I was nervous. I was humbled by it. Like who are you, Wayne Dyer? Who are you to read the Tao and believe that you can interpret it on television and interpret it in a book and spend a year and say, like, I got real humble with that. And you know what I say? Tao, which is just another word for God, or Source, or Krishna, or Allah, or whatever you want to call it, guide me. Guide me now. I have that awareness before I come out. If you knew, it says in the Course in Miracles, if you knew who walked beside you, at all times. On this path that you have chosen, you could never experience fear or doubt again. Okay, let's go on to the next thought. To change. So you're changing from not trusting in your nature to trusting in your nature. You change your thought from I need more to what I call living contentment. What is this thing about more? It's the mantra of the ego, isn't it? I have to have more. I have to collect more stuff. I have to have more friends. I have to have more money. It's more, 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 more. When where you came from nowhere. You don't need anything. It's a continuous bombardment that we are all exposed to in this whole world of believing that we have to have more. It's one of the reasons why I love public television so much. You don't see ads on PBS. You don't have to be constantly exposed to the idea that you have to have more and you have to get more, and if you don't have this, then you're not complete, and so on. So we get bombarded with this idea of attracting more. And Lao Tzu says, live contentment. Live in a state of being contented. Here's verse 81, the last verse of the Tao Te Ching. My favorite translation of it, and I put it right into the book. Sages do not accumulate anything, but give everything to others. Having more, the more they give.